Hi, I'm going to be telling you about one of the worst occurrences in history. This story begins in Pripyat, Ukraine, under the Soviet Union. The Chernobyl station belonged to the Soviet Union, who had existed from 1922 to 1991. This was 69 years of operation. The Chernobyl power station was not established till the late 1970s along the Pripyat River. Not until 1977 were the 4 RBMK reactors commissioned to be built at the station. These reactors were built during the Cold War, which was a time of isolation and lack of safety precautions. Now, not only was this a bad time to build these reactors, they were built with design flaws because the Soviet Union had little knowledge on what they were doing. Now, the Soviet Union was very heavily involved in nuclear power during this time, but still didn't understand how to properly build these reactors. So they ended up placing these reactors there, and they had operated them for a while, and they ran plenty of tests on them. But on April 25th, 1986, there was no going back from the disaster they created with the design flaws. Now, on this day, they ran a test on Reactor 4. These extremely untrained personnel were trying to see if they could run emergency water pumps with inertial power. Due to design flaws that I mentioned earlier, they ended up removing the emergency safety systems and the power regulating system that controlled the reactor. They continued making more operator errors that only made their situation worse. Finally, they ended up running the reactor at such a low power that the reactor became extremely unstable. There was no coming back from here. Although they tried fixing the problem, there was nothing they could do. They inserted all the control rods back into the panel, and this caused the first explosion. This first explosion killed 2 of the workers trying to fix the problem. Seconds later, the second explosion happened when the water coolant from the test they ran earlier mixed with the zirconium in the reactor. After these 2 explosions, 50 tons of radioactive material was released into the atmosphere. Now, not long after this, firemen were being rushed to the scenes to put out the fires from the explosions. Now, the firemen didn't understand what kind of fire these were or how to put them out, so they were spraying water on the fire that wasn't really extinguishing it, and the water would come back on them and give them really bad radioactive burns. And because the workers and firemen were already in such close proximity, they were still going to develop acute radioactive syndrome. Not only were the firemen and workers being exposed to this awful radioactivity, there were citizens 2 miles away on what is now known the Bridge of Death who were experiencing this radioactivity as well. They were playing in the ashes from the fire, not understanding what it was or that it could kill them. Now, in the end, 30 people ended up dying weeks after this occurrence, and they ended up evacuating 350,000 people on April 27th. But it still didn't help when 4,000 people ended up dying in the long term. Now, the Soviet Union tried hiding as much as they could about this event, but they ended up dissolving 5 years later because of how awful this was. The reactors were finally shut down in 2000, but even though they are not operating anymore, it is still extremely radioactive, and scientists say that it will be closed for 20,000 years after this occurrence. The story of the Chernobyl disaster is an awful one, and the deaths that occurred were even more terrible. Now, it will never be forgotten because we have learned our lesson, and we have created new laws and new safety restrictions and regulations surrounding this type of stuff to protect our environment and people. Thank you.